1940 में ब्रिटिश इंडियन आर्मी की बलोच रेजिमेंट की 5वीं पलटन ज्वाइन की। हिंदुस्तानी सिपाहियों ने जापानीज का बहुत बहादुरी से मुकाबला किया और उन्हें जापानीज के हवाले कर दिया गया। हिंदुस्तान और अंग्रेजों के बीच एक धागा था, वो टूट गया। गद्दारी की कोई माफी नहीं होगी।
You were charged with Indian Army Act Section 41, waging war against the king.
जब अंग्रेजी अफसरों ने साडी हिफाजत नहीं की, तो वो हमारी वफादारी के हकदार किस तरह हो सकते हैं? अगर जिंदा बचा उसके बाद शादी करोगी मुझसे?
So it was the middle of 17th century when Mughal Emperor Shahjahan decided to shift his capital from Agra back to Delhi. City with the foundation of Mughal Empire was laid by his ancestors. He called this new city Shahjahanabad, which took 9 long years to be built. The city of gold housed his royal fort called Red Fort, strings of markets, bazaars, havellis, temples, mosques, churches that were later added by the British. Now to go back to the history and chart the course of how this city was built and what all eras it has seen, one needs to be a traveller in this busy space. Shah Jahan commissioned the building of new capital as per records on April 19, 1639. The city in those days was beautifully organized, with mighty red fort and its ramparts running on one side, and the walls housing the city on the other side kept curving till it met ramparts of the fort, with river Yamuna flowing behind the fort and a canal flowing between the city. Prior to building this city, Shah Jahan had already established his name by building this wonder of the world, Taj Mahal, the most beautiful ever mausoleum built in the memory of his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal. Today's Shahjahanabad is a maze where life keeps on and on, goes on, where each and every small piece of space is squeezed for breath. To talk why the capital was shifted from Agra to Delhi, I have with me Kanika Singh of Ashoka University. Thanks, Kanika, for joining us. She's a traveller, she's a historian, and she's a member of Delhi Heritage Walk. Kanika, why Shah Jahan chose to build new capital here at this site?
I think it suited his personality to be so ambitious architecturally. When Shah Jahan became the king, the Mughals, even though the capital was not at Delhi, they had a fairly long association with Delhi. Babur had been here, Humayun had his capital here, Akbar visited this place often, and the Sufi saints were here. Nizamuddin Aulia is buried here, Qutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki is buried here. So Delhi had great spiritual and political significance. For Shah Jahan, Agra, I think, had become very crowded, and we know him to be a very, very ambitious king, both not only politically, but he liked to show off his ambition through his architecture, through his love for architecture. And it seems fitting that he chose to come back to Delhi, a place which had been traditionally associated as an imperial city, and build a new capital city for himself.
Well, his love for architecture is displayed much, of course, with Taj Mahal.
Yes.
Which were the prominent places one could associate with Shah Jahan's period?
The Red Fort, of course, as the house of the family, the palace, and also the court. and the very famous Chandni Chowk, the main boulevard for the city. Another very prominent boulevard was the Fairs Bazaar, which is roughly what Daryaganj is today. And of course, Fatehpuri Masjid, a very, very important congregation mosque, the Jama Masjid, the main congregation mosque for the city. And many neighborhoods and bazaars still retain the old names which were probably given when Shah Jahan initially built the city. For instance, Matia Mahal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it really a stream of river that flowed between the two facades of
Sides
Daryaganj?
of the city. No, I don't think that's where the name comes from. That was actually the case with Chandni Chowk. So the street we see here where we are standing, right from where it starts until where it ends at the Fatehpuri Masjid, there was a stream of water flowing right through its center, and all this water would reflect moonlight. That is why the name Chandni for moonlight, and Chowk, the square, a very prominent square for on the main street itself. For Daryaganj, it was a marketplace right next to the Darya. That is why the name Daryaganj.
Besides Red Fort and palaces of the royals, the city also housed several havellis of the noblemen. The architecture of the houses and its design still reminisces with the eras bygone.
If you see a plan of Shahjahanabad, you'll see a very, very prominent axis of the Chandni Chowk with the Red Fort at one end. So some historians have actually said that with the boundary wall all around, this actually resembles a bow and an arrow, an archer holding a bow and an arrow, and the Chandni Chowk is actually the arrow, yeah, and the Red Fort being situated at the site where there's the conjunction of the bow and the arrow. So that's one way of looking at it. When Shah Jahan built the city, he didn't have each and every street in mind, yeah. So what he did was he built the most prominent places like the fort and the masjid, and then gave away parts of land to his most important noblemen, asking them that you guys go ahead and build your own havelis and your houses over there. So these havelis actually came up almost as an image of the Red Fort itself, with their a public area and a private area, and sometimes these havelis and mohallas could be, frankly speaking, a single neighborhood on their own, a cosmos within their own. Yeah. So many of the neighborhoods and the mohallas we have now were actually just came up organically. So one important guy builds his own haveli, and around that main important house are the houses of his dependents. So that's how the city grew, and that's what you see in the city planning. Yeah. Later in the 19th century, things changed a lot with the coming of the British. With 1857, things changed a lot. A lot of the city was simply flattened.
Today there are locations which are named prominently after 6 gates.
Yes.
Starting with Delhi Gate, then Turkman Gate, Ajmeri, Lahori, Mori and Kashmiri Gate. I guess the numbers were much higher in those days.
I think the general agreement is that there were some 14 main gates and some 6 or 7 small wicker gates. So the 14 main gates, not each of them survived. There are very few, like you mentioned, only Delhi Gate, Turkman Gate. These are some names survive, some gates actually survive. So most of these gates are named after the cities or the directions, the highways they lead to. So for instance, the Kashmiri Gate or the Lahori Gate or the Delhi Gate. Delhi Gate meaning that it led to the older city of Delhi, which was in Mehrauli.
For life flows like blood in the veins of these gully mohallas and kuchas of Shahjahanabad. Hard to imagine, but even Republic Day parade and grand Ram Leela procession used to pass through these gullies and small little alleys of Shahjahanabad, like this one. Well, how easy it is to submerge yourself in these spaces, full of history and its own small stories and several narratives. In the last 4 centuries, Shahjahanabad has grown manifold, adding diversities in its multi-layered lives. One of the cultures here which has still survived can be found in the architecture, its DNA. Now here, in one of the restored havelis in Dharampura locality, one could still feel how the life must have been in those days when the royal came calling. Well, the havelis of Shahjahanabad were no less. They were kind of a replica to the Red Fort, the royal palace of the king. In this haveli, we'll find traces or the remnants of the architecture of those times, the basic design that has survived through several centuries. Although improvisations had been made, but the structure is more or less the same. Have a look at the store. It's a wooden door with a glass panel, but around the vignette we have the design which is so very typical of Mughal time. Perhaps this is how the buildings during Shah Jahan's time look like, with a pillared work around the doors. Above the door we have these chhajjas, which also has lattice work. Now these kind of chhajjas and chabutras and even chatas we'll find in a lot of buildings in Kinari Bazaar, Dariba and Chandni Chowk. Another basic structure of the houses of those times, rather havelis of those times, were angans like this. Now these were the place where congregation used to happen. These were kind of diwane-am of those times.
Steeped in the history, Jama Masjid is one of the prominent mosques here. Termed Great Cathedral by European travelers, the mosque shines in eminence on a hillock, putting it on a pedestal. Built with red sandstone, the mosque has 3 magnificent marble domes and 2 tall minars on the either sides. Standing 130 meters high, these minars have witnessed the ever-growing city in the last 4 centuries.
Jama Masjid is at a height, so just approaching it, and the huge courtyard gives you a sense of vastness and space, which even now for us coming out from outside the hustle and bustle of the city is a huge contrast. So it is indeed very, very impressive. Architecturally, it's a great contrast of, it uses the stone of the sandstone and the marble so very well, and the symmetry is also very, very great. Yeah. So this is what Shah Jahan's architecture is known for: the balance and symmetry and the very, very delicate work on its facade. So you can see the great proportions of the dome, which typically architects refer to as a bulbous dome. You can see the great arches, which are known as scalloped arches, which are typical of Shah Jahan's time, and the calligraphy on the panels also. So all of this gives the Jama Masjid its rightly earned status as the main congregation mosque of the city.
By the time Jama Masjid was built, the Mughals had already built Deen Panah, they had built Humayun Tomb, they had built Sikandra, they had built Buland Darwaza, they had built Agra's Red Fort, they built Taj Mahal, they built Red Fort. So is this a last of the remnant of Mughal architecture in a grandeur sort of way, if one looks in that sort of a historical perspective?
For Shah Jahan, maybe, but let's not forget that after him came Aurangzeb, who built the Badshahi Masjid at Lahore. So that's an equally stunning monument and of equally great proportions. So for Delhiites and North India, maybe yes, but when we are talking about Hindustan way back in the 17th century or 18th century, Lahore was very much part of it, and the Badshahi Masjid, yes. So this is definitely not the last. It's very interesting both for its artistic skill as well as for its content. So the artistic skill here is that all of this is inlay in marble. So it's not engraved on stone, but it is inlaid. So the writing has been inlaid, yeah. And differently colored stone have been put in as alphabets to form that line, yeah. Coming to the content, you would typically expect that in a mosque everything would be in the praise of Allah, the Almighty. But actually here the praise is entirely directed at Shah Jahan himself, who was the king and the builder of this mosque.
Lastly, when you talk of the inlaying of calligraphies, it's something like a Pietrodora work in
Yes,
Taj
that's
Mahal?
exactly what I mean.
Right.
Yes, yeah. So you have marble, which is the base, and the black marble, the stone, which is the design on which it's
Right.
While the history of this city is replete with raids, battles and conquest, one aspect which simply went on was business. The business just went on in its markets and haunts. Today, Chandni Chowk is the heart of Delhi's trade, easily a commercial zone of the city. History is seeped in its veins. A busy street with historic Red Fort and Fatehpuri Masjid on its each end, the Silver Street is as old as the city of Shahjahanabad itself.
So Kanika, Chandni Chowk must have been very different in those days. It's quite a packed location, and I'm sure there are great passages about how there were fountains in the middle part. Just take us to that era, how it was.
So, like today, back then when the city was first founded, Chandni Chowk was intended as the main market, the main boulevard of the city. It was the main axis. And like today, there were shops on both sides, some double-storied as well. But what really made it beautiful was the fact that right through its center, right along through its entire length, there is a channel of water running. And a little further, where today there is the town hall, was the main chowk for the city. So which had a pool, again with water in it. Yeah? So all this water reflected moonlight, and that is what gave the city its name as Chandni Chowk. Other commerce included practically everything you can think of under the sun. So things which are useful for our daily lives, from pan, betel leaves to spices, yeah, to things like carpet weaving, yeah, or seeds for agriculture. Practically everything was traded or manufactured within the city, and there were specific markets for those trading activities. Believed to have been built by Jahan, but it's probably Ali Mardan Khan who, he was a major nobleman he's a very, very prominent nobleman in Shah Jahan's court. Jahan, who was the favorite daughter of Shah Jahan, was very active in the town planning. So she had a substantial amount of money which she put in the planning of the city. And so what we today see as the town hall and the Puraani Dilli railway station was actually an estate that belonged to Jahan. It had her caravanserai, it had a series of public baths, and it had a garden which was built. That was Jahan estate. Yeah. So she did have a huge contribution to how the city looked like back then. Whether Chandni Chowk specifically as a street was designed by her is difficult to say. Yeah. But yes, she did have a very, very important part to play in the layout of the city of Shahjahanabad.
Were there any specific rules in the market, like there will be certain designated place only for the royals and rest for the commoners?
Yes, there were some exclusive royal markets. We have an example right there inside the Red Fort, the covered Chhatta Chowk. As you enter the Red Fort, you go through a double-storied market place. That was an exclusively royal market. Yeah.
We are in the by-lanes of popular 17th century market near Chandni Chowk, Dariba Kalan. The famous bazaar in Delhi for jewels, gemstones, ornaments and everything you could lay your hands on to look good.
Eking out of Chandni Chowk, a by-lane, Dariba Kalan, is a contemporary market to Shah Jahan's times. Kanika, this is shade quieter and shade cooler than the ever-busy Chandni Chowk. What is the history of Dariba Kalan?
The name itself, Dariba and Kalan, is two words here. The word Dariba is believed to have is derived from a Persian word which meant a pearl which is so beautiful that it had no comparison, so of incomparable beauty. And Kalan is like the greater neighborhood. You must have heard of these words, Kalan and Khurd. We use them even today in denoting neighborhoods. So this was the greater neighborhood, was a jewelry market. It's still now a very colorful market for jewelry.
Nestled in the lanes of Dariba is Kinari Bazaar, another popular destination for shoppers and festivals at almost any time.
Very significant, this area we are in is part of the larger neighborhood of Dharampura, which is essentially a Jain neighborhood, predominantly a Jain neighborhood. So you will see not only commercial establishments of the Jain community, but their homes and their temples. So some very, very beautiful Jain temples and very many of them within the Dharampura locality. And in fact, the place where we started from was the very famous Digambar Jain Lal Mandir.
We started from there, Lal Mandir. I mean,
Yes.
that also seems to be contemporary of Shah Jahan's time.
Yes, you're right. The shrine itself is believed to belong to the 17th, middle of 17th century when Shah Jahan set up the city. But now it's an extremely prominent landmark. So most of the temple, the way it is constructed now, is mostly a 19th century one. But the shrine is believed to be very old. In fact, it's considered the oldest Jain temple of Shahjahanabad, and it's a very, very significant shrine for the Jain community. The temple was probably built for Jain soldiers who were in the employ of Shah Jahan. Later, during Aurangzeb's time, Aurangzeb was the successor and son of Shah Jahan. During his time, the story tells us that Aurangzeb didn't like having a prominent Jain mandir right across his house, and in fact issued orders prohibiting the ringing of bells inside the temple. But despite his orders, apparently things continued and he could still hear the sounds of the bell, the holy bells. That made him very, very angry, and the story tells us that he marched inside the temple to punish the guilty who was violating his farman, and he found that there was nobody there, and it was just divine will that these bells were going on, and that taught him a lesson, and he decided not to harass the temple anymore.
Walking down a bit of Dariba Kalan, we come across Kinari Bazaar.
Yes.
Is it also the old settlement? I know the old building of St. Stephen College, which was established in the 20th century, was there, Katra Kushal Rai. But there is a market before that, which is very, very famous for the bridal wear and shadi ka saman you have, and also like things to buy during the festivities. So how old is Kinari Bazaar? Is it also contemporary to Dariba Kalan, or in the larger scheme of things, the founding markets at the time of Shahjahanabad was built?
The people who live in Kinari Bazaar today claim that their houses go back to Shah Jahan's time. Yeah. They definitely go back to the Mughal time, but it's hard to say if it is contemporary to Shah Jahan's time. But yes, definitely by, say, the 18th century, the second half of the 18th century, and definitely by the 19th century, Kinari Bazaar had come up as a very, very prominent marketplace.
Among the bazaars in the old city, Chitli Kabar 2 stands out as one of the oldest, catering to everyone and especially to women. On the other end of Chandni Chowk, just before the starting of spice market of Khari Bauli, the 17th century mosque Fatehpuri Masjid, built by one of Emperor Shah Jahan's wife, Fatehpuri Begum, the only single-dome mosque in old Delhi. Well, one aspect you can't miss here is food. Straight from the kitchen of Shahi Khansama, from Mughlai to Marwadi to in Punjabi, your plate will always remain full in Shahjahanabad.
Talk of food for that matter, we have old famous Jalebi Wala, Parathe Wali Gali.
Yes.
We hear of Bina Bazaar.
Yeah.
We hear of several jewelers and Atarwala from Dariba and Kinari Bazaar.
Yeah.
Did they also exist in those days?
Many would like to claim their ancestry, yes.
We have Ghante Wala Halwai right at the end of this
Yes,
boulevard.
right, exactly. Unfortunately, you know, the commercial establishment doesn't survive anymore. Ghante Wala closed shop some time ago. But yes, their claim to fame was that they were the mithai walas to the Mughal emperors. Similarly for the Kareems. Yes, they believe and they claim, and in fact we are all sold on that claim that their spices and their recipes are all secret coming from the Mughal kitchens. We know some of the most famous places trace their descent from the Mughal or trace their association with the Mughals, but many of them would also be recent. So for instance, Parathe Wali Gali is definitely a 19th century innovation. Yeah.
Well, it was time well spent in Shahjahanabad, Emperor's own city, where we charted the course from its birth and its evolution through several centuries to where it stands today. In our next episode of Talk History, we'll take you to another interesting aspect of Delhi. Thank you and keep watching Talk History.